Hey everyone, my name is Justin. Welcome to the channel where my son and I take a look at games, classic and modern, and give our thoughts on how these games appeal to different generations. Today we're taking a look at Cris Tales, released for all major systems and PC in July of 2021, developed by Dreams Incorporated, and published by Modus Games. Cris Tales is a game that had a short demo that piqued my interest, but it wasn't until recently that we had the time to really give it a shot. So, is it any good, or is it best forgotten and left in the past?
Cris Tales tells the story of Cris Bell, a young girl growing up in an orphanage in a small town, when one day a weird talking frog appears.
Best talking frog ever!
Not now, Zaz, we'll get to you later. Anyway, the frog leads Cris Bell around the town, introducing her to her newly discovered time magic and introducing her to the threat that is the Empress of Time. Along the way, she is joined by a small but relatively well-written cast of friends and side characters as she sets about to stop the Empress of Time from destroying everything and fights to protect those she cares about. The game centers around Cris Bell and her friends the mages Christopher and Wilhelm, the android JKR, the sisters Zaz and Kari, the inventor Audrey, and Matthias, our froggy guide. Cris Bell, the main character and a time mage. Her ability to affect the past and future is unique amongst time mages. She can send enemy units forward or backward into time depending on which side of the screen they're on. She also serves as our primary healer and buffer, an overall excellent support unit, which is useful since she's in the party the entire game.
Cris Bell aside, I felt like the rest of the cast was uneven at best. Some characters like Kari join you late in the game, and the way her mechanics work require a lot of setup. She collects and summons souls of various creatures, much like the hunter from Octopath Traveler, and depending on the time frame, the summon has a different effect. The main problem is that the in-battle tooltip only shows you the effect will have in that moment, not the possibilities. So if you don't have a cheat sheet or you haven't memorized them, it's difficult to really take advantage of her abilities. This makes her frustratingly uneven, as you may need, say, fire damage, but if the enemy is in the present, her damage may be electricity. Her sister Zaz, however, is the opposite. Zaz may very well be my favorite character introduced to any game in a very long time. She's quirky and weird, she serves as the comedic relief of the team, and plays the role perfectly. She brings a vast amount of versatility to the party, with her healing, elemental damage, and above average melee damage. Most of her abilities have some form of luck involved with the timing of a roulette wheel, but if you can get the timing down, she's one of the more powerful units in the game. The biggest downside to Zaz is her basic attacks have a random output, meaning sometimes instead of doing regular damage, she'll throw out a confusing attack that can waste an entire turn if she does this during a boss fight. But even still, she's easily, in my opinion, the best character in the game.
Dang it, Dad, I wanted to use Zaz. I liked how the game would be really serious, and Zaz would pop in with something funny, and unlike Marvel movies, she was actually funny and did it right.
Attempting to initiate access thingy accepted.
What are you doing?
It's more fun when I'm the one doing the narration.
But since you used her, I'll go with JKR. It was interesting to see the robot interacting with people. He starts off not having any memories besides his name, and doesn't know what his purpose is. It's neat watching him piece things together and try to find out who he is and what his purpose is. In combat, he was also really useful, with his chaining attacks and how much damage he could do. Nothing beat him as a main damage dealer. On the other hand, you have a character like Audrey. She's introduced early on in the game as an NPC, but joins you much later in the game near the end. She's the only unit in the game that can do damage to both sides at the same time, which can be incredibly useful. But her special abilities are her real downfall. Her kit is based around setting up mines and turrets, and then having Cris Bell send them forward or backward in time to take effect, or activate them with the remote. This means she can pack a real punch, but she also needs a lot of setup to do something that JKR can do on his own. Also, with her coming into the party so late, that the damage niche is already filled by other characters, so she's very easily left on the bench.
Beyond the playable characters, the game has a few NPCs that pop up here and there, from the giant statue Paulina that helps us get around, the volcano sisters that are constantly getting in our way, but the main threat is the Empress of Time, a beautiful woman that seeks to subjugate the world through whatever means necessary, whether that means poisoning the people to turn them into monsters for her army, straight up invading towns, or turning politicians into her pawns to get what she wants. She's a suitable antagonist and one that is very easy to hate. She also pops up frequently enough that she feels like a very present danger, and is pretty well written, if you ask me.
The gameplay for Cris Tales is pretty simple. Crisbell and her team are traveling around trying to reach the different cathedrals to further unlock Crisbell's time magic. Along the way, you end up having to help other people and stop some schemes the Empress is trying to pull in each city. Combat takes place in random turn-based battles, with enemies on either side of the party. Enemies to the left of Crisbell can be sent in the past, those on the right can be sent in the future. This leads to some neat combos, such as Christopher using water magic to make an enemy wet, and then Crisbell sending them to the future, causing the armor to rust and decreasing their defense. Unfortunately, while this gimmick was really cool, I almost never needed it. In fact, I beat the game without hardly ever using it. Outside of combat, you can use time magic for quests, and each city will have one major decision you have to make that uses time magic, but as cool possibilities were, I feel like it was a really underused mechanic.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to agree with you, bud. There were some dungeons that made brief use of the time magic, but in general, I almost never used it. I did like that the battle system used a Mario RPG-like approach to offensive and defensive timing, allowing you to increase or decrease damage respectively if you time it properly.
Yeah, I don't get that reference, Dad.
Yeah, we need to fix that. Anyway, my biggest issue with the game is it just moves so slow. Moving around towns feels like a snail's pace. It makes getting around painful and boring. Also, the fights early on have a pretty stark difficulty spike as you haven't had access to upgrades to your weapons or armor. This leads to even random battles against trash monsters take forever. And don't get me started on some of the boss fights. This issue kind of gets compounded by the swing the other direction. By the mid to late game, you are all but unkillable, and boss fights become a joke. I found myself many times sitting there waiting for the boss to enter a new phase, only to realize, nope, that's it. If there's one area where I feel Cris Tales thrives, it's the graphics and sound, specifically the voice acting, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, graphically speaking, the game has this child's pop-up book-like look to it. It's whimsical and beautiful, and the game doesn't take itself too seriously, which leads to some fun things such as, need a boat? Here, use a giant high-heel shoe. The spell effects are snappy and clean, which makes timing for extra damage really easy. But I have to talk about the voice acting. Now, normally, I don't care about voice acting, and often play with sound off or music playing. But the voice acting in Cris Tales was just so good, even the random villagers, that I found myself listening to every line of dialogue. The actors impart so much personality, and I have to give a shout out to Lizzie Freeman, who voiced Zaz. While everyone does a great job, I absolutely adored the personality and quirky nature of Zaz, and Lizzie captured her goofy persona wonderfully.
For numerous reasons, I believe that
For numerous reasons, I believe that to be true. I love this guy!
Great points, Dad. The voice acting was great. So was the music. I think they knew exactly what to play to set the tone. Bonus that the music they used was also really good. The town music was calm and peaceful, the battle music was loud and energetic, and the victory theme was big and triumphant.
Cris Tales was a game I just wasn't sure of going into it. The intro is slow, not necessarily in a bad way, but then you get into the game and the first dungeon-like area is pretty painful to get through, with the difficulty spikes and how long the fights take. and then the pendulum swings and it becomes laughably easy. I absolutely love the art style and cannot sing the praises of the voice actors enough. What do you think, son?
I liked the game. I thought it was a lot of fun. I liked the characters and their personalities. It was fun watching them develop as the game went out. Like Wilhelm, who was at the start really doesn't seem to like Christopher, but as the game goes on, his teasing turns more playful, like an older brother trying to teach his sibling rather than just antagonizing him.
Great points, bud. In the end, I'm going to give Cris Tales a 6 out of 10. The game had some highlights: Zaz, the art style, and overall excellent voice acting, but it was also incredibly uneven as a game. The middle section was well paced, moved along with just the right difficulty, but the opening was a slog, and the latter half was kind of a joke, with nothing putting up anything even remotely close to a challenge. This is a game I wanted to love more than I do. The art styles, characters, voice acting are great, but ultimately, even with all the charm the art and characters had, it couldn't overcome the shortcomings. I do think there's some fun to have with Cris Tales, but you have to work really hard to push past all the crap in the way.
Wow, Dad, brutal! I'd go a little higher, like a 6.75 out of 10. I thought the game was good, the characters were interesting, the art was neat, the music was cool, but I definitely agree. It was really slow at points, and I feel so much focus was put into the time manipulation feature that in actual gameplay, you rarely use it out of battle, and almost never need it in fights. So those are our thoughts on Cris Tales. Were you able to see this through to the future, or is it better left as a memory in the past? Whatever your thoughts, comment below, and let us know if you liked our work. Maybe support us with a like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks everyone!